Robot Computer Zeroth, we wish to learn about the casing surrounding Earth humanoids. You have information?
Negative.
Then examine random specimen. Understood?
Affirmative.
Immediate and urgent.
Stop it. Oh, Wendy, I know it's you. Now stop tickling with the...
Ready to report.
Proceed.
Casing soft to computer sensors, except where inner frame approaches surface. Then resistant to pressure. Color. Pale.
Insufficient detail. Examine.
Paleness made up of different colors and shades. White, pink, sometimes red. Lines on some surfaces, red, some brown. Blue lines visible beneath. Assume these are lubrication channels for inner machinery.
All humanoid casings are of these colors.
Negative. Some are different.
But all inner machinery is exactly the same.
Affirmative.
Texture.
Smooth.
Close analysis.
Casing crowded with tiny holes. Occasional small fur-like growth.
Name of casing material.
Skin.
Information adequate. Robot Computer Zeroth, mission completed. Off. Return to Starbase.
What was that? Something happened. Oh, I don't know what it was, but it nearly made me jump out of my skin.
Skin, it's wonderful stuff. Sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it's rough. Sometimes it's thick, and sometimes it's thin. It keeps outside out, and it holds inside in. That's skin.
Tony, have you ever considered what clever stuff skin is? It's like a stretchy bag that holds us all together.
Yeah.
You couldn't do without it.
Oh, I suppose not.
No. It's one of the first things you notice when you meet people as well. Well, it can vaguely tell us what sort of age somebody is, and also possibly where their ancestors came from. Well, there's a dark skin. His family probably came from somewhere hot.
And he's got a pale skin. So he probably came from somewhere cooler, like Birmingham, for instance.
Oh, there's a lovely smooth skin. She's quite young.
And there's a wrinkled and lined skin. She's not so young.
It is interesting stuff, you know. I mean, people's moods, for instance. You can almost tell what people's moods are when you look at them.
What do you mean?
Well, you must have heard the expression, white with anger.
Well, I suppose you blush red with embarrassment.
Yes, I do. Or you could go blue with cold.
Yes. Or if I told you a funny joke, you might be tickled pink.
And you could go green with envy.
You don't really go green, though, do you?
No.
Anymore, you know that expression, he's got a thick skin. You know, when somebody doesn't care what people think about them or say about them. They don't really have a thick skin. Not like a rhinoceros. Rhinoceroses really have got thick skin. Now, how the rhinoceros went about getting a thick skin, that's another story.
Once upon a time, on an uninhabited island on the shores of the Red Sea, there lived a Parsi, from whose hat the rays of the sun were reflected in more than oriental splendor. And the Parsee lived by the Red Sea with nothing but his hat and his knife and a cooking stove of the kind that you must particularly never touch. And one day he took flour and water and currants and plums and sugar and things and made himself one cake, which was 2 feet across and 3 feet thick. It was indeed a superior comestible. That's magic. And he put it on the stove, because he was allowed to cook on that stove. And he baked it and he baked it till it was all done brown and smelt most sentimental. But just as he was going to eat it, there came down to the beach from the altogether uninhabited interior one rhinoceros with a horn on his nose, 2 piggy ears and few manners. In those days, the rhinoceros's skin fitted him quite tight, and there were no wrinkles in it anywhere. He looked exactly a Noah's Ark rhinoceros, but of course much bigger. All the same, he had no manners then, and he has no manners now. And he never will have any manners. He said, "How?" And the Parsee left that cake and climbed to the top of a palm tree, with nothing on but his hat, from which the rays of the sun were always reflected in more than oriental splendor. And the rhinoceros upset the oil stove with his nose, and the cake rolled on the sand, and he spiked that cake on the horn of his nose, and he ate it, and he went away waving his tail to the desolate and exclusively uninhabited interior. Then the Parsee came down from his palm tree and put the stove on its legs and recited the following verse, which, as you have not heard, I will now proceed to relate. Them that takes cakes, which the Parsee man bakes, makes dreadful mistakes. But there was a great deal more in that than you would think, because 5 weeks later there was a heat wave in the Red Sea, and everybody took off all their clothes. The Parsee took off his hat, but the rhinoceros took off his skin and carried it over his shoulder as he came down to the beach to bathe. He said nothing whatever about the Parsee's cake, because he'd eaten it all, and he never had any manners then, since, or henceforward. He waddled straight into the water and blew bubbles through his nose, leaving his skin on the beach. Presently the Parsee came by and found the skin, and he smiled one smile that ran all round his face 2 times. Then he danced 3 times round the skin and rubbed his hands. Then he went to his camp and filled his hat with cake crumbs, for the Parsee never ate anything else but cake, and never swept out his camp. He took that skin, and he shook that skin, and he scrubbed that skin, and he rubbed that skin just as full of old, dry, stale, tickly cake crumbs and some burned currants as ever it could possibly hold. Then he climbed to the top of his palm tree and waited for the rhinoceros to come out of the water and put it on. And the rhinoceros did. He buttoned it up with the 3 buttons, and it tickled like cake crumbs in bed. Then he wanted to scratch, but that made it worse. And then he lay down on the sands and rolled and rolled and rolled, and every time he rolled, the cake crumbs tickled him worse and worse and worse. And then he ran to the palm tree and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed himself against it. He rubbed so much and so hard that he rubbed his skin into a great fold over his shoulders, and another fold underneath where the buttons used to be. But he'd rubbed the buttons off, and he rubbed some more folds over his legs. And it spoiled his temper. But it didn't make the least difference to the cake crumbs. They were inside his skin, and they tickled. So he went home, very angry indeed, and horribly scratchy. And from that day to this, every rhinoceros has great folds in his skin, and a very bad temper, all on account of the cake crumbs inside. You know, when you come to think of it, everything's got a skin. Well, an outer surface that it shows to the rest of the world. Even water.
Has it?
Yes. I'll prove it to you. Look. See this? Look how clever that is. One ordinary glass of water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one ordinary needle. And there you can see the needle actually balancing on top of that skin on top of the water. Look, let me show you how I did it. And
It's amazing.
if I
Linda.
try and push this away, I've already balanced it on there on a bit of tissue. And you have to wait for the tissue to absorb the water. Hang on.
What?
Oh, dear.
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, I see.
It is. You watch. You watch.
Yes. Oh,
You
look.
watch.
Look at that.
Just bear with me.
Look at that. Oh.
Don't you think I'm brilliant? There you are, you see?
I think that's
I
very
proved
good.
it. In winter, there's an even more obvious skin on water. And even people can walk on it then.
Water glistening.
Water gleaming.
Water lapping.
Water slapping.
Water shining.
Water splashing.
Water lapping.
Water slapping.
Nighttime.
North wind blows cold.
Arrow sharp.
A knife slice. Water thickens.
Thin skins.
A hint of ice.
Dream of ice.
Ice skin.
North wind cuts deep.
Ill wind.
Chill wind.
Over ice.
Thin still.
Think it's ice.
Think it's thicker.
It is ice.
Thick ice.
Hard ice.
Hard skin.
Thick skin.
Bright white ice.
Hard, bright, white ice skin.
Hard, bright white ice hide.
Morning, children.
Ice.
Nice.
Glide.
Slide.
Ride the ice.
Nice ice.
Glide.
Creek?
Slide.
What's that?
Creek.
Ice is weak.
Creek.
Eek!
Stand back.
Slide. Glide. Ice will break.